singing is actually really helpful to learn the theology and learn doctrine. If you want to teach ABCs to children, what do?
You teach them a song.
You teach them a song. And actually, as an adult, if I'm having to think about the alphabet, I'm like, A, B, C, D, E, F, G. It's that song.
You still sing it?
Yeah, I still sing it.
Hello and welcome to Independence, the FIEC podcast. Thank you for joining us again. My name is Adrian Reynolds. I'm the head of national ministries for the FIEC. One day I'm going to get that wrong, but that's what I am today. I'm the head of national ministries for the FIEC, and I'm here with Sally Jackman. Hello, Sally.
Hello.
Sally the singer, because we're here to talk about singing.
Yes.
And you are a singer. We're both singers, actually, except you're a professional, I'm an amateur.
I'm hardly a professional.
Well, you were you've done it. You've got a music degree.
Okay. Yeah, I have trained, but I just like to sing.
Tell us your singing story. You like to sing from a very young age.
Oh yes, I have always loved singing. I would actually not allow my family to leave the dinner table until we'd sung a song, mostly Wheels on the Bus.
That's quite demanding.
Yeah, and I had a really southern, I have a southern accent now, but it was just not great. I'd seen videos of it, and by the end I'd be like, all day long. It was terrible. But I wouldn't,
for the purposes of clarification, that's going to be the only singing you will hear on this podcast.
No, I think you should give us a little sing-song, Adrian.
We've done a podcast with, we did a podcast on piano playing for piano players with Phil Moore, and he got me playing the piano. We've done a podcast with Andy Fenton on playing the guitar, and he got me playing the guitar. I don't think you're going to get me singing. I don't think you're going to get me singing. But just for the purposes of clarification, this isn't... at one level, this isn't a podcast for singers in church, although it is, because everyone's a singer. We'll come back to that in just a moment, right? But this is a podcast for church leaders. And I guess the question we're really wrestling with is, what's the place of singing in church life? And I think we're going to say it's very important. And given that, how do we help people sing well? Now, one of the ways might be having a singer at front. That might be an answer. It's not an answer for every church, because not every church has got someone who can do that. Yeah. But we'll come back to the answer to that question. But first of all, Sally, why do we sing? What is so special about singing?
There's actually a few reasons why we sing in church.
Go on.
The first one I would say is that God commands us to.
Okay,
in the Bible.
That's a good start, isn't it?
Yeah. Why would you do anything? Because God tells us to.
Yeah.
So God commands us to, and then there's just so many examples of it in the Bible, like in Psalms, and then when
I've got a Psalm. I'm just open at the middle of the Psalms, and obviously. So here we are, Psalm 96, 97, 90, all those Psalms in the middle. Yeah. Sing to the Lord a new song, for He has done marvelous things. So it's interesting actually that singing there is connected to. What God has done and God's character and work in the world. It's not just an abstract thing. Yeah. It's connected to who God is and what He's done, isn't it? Yeah, absolutely. And you see that as well, like when kind of Miriam sings in Exodus 15 after they've kind of been delivered. Yes. That's God has delivered them and has saved them from slavery. And so her response is praise and glorifying God. But there are times. Why singing though? Why not poetry readings or shouts?
I think they did shout as well. I think
they did. So here I am, Psalm 100, shout for joy to the Lord. Yeah, but why singing?
Singing.
I've got a theory. I want to hear yours.
Okay, I would say singing connects the kind of knowledge, head stuff, and heart stuff, and emotion. Kind of adds in a little bit of that emotion and. It's kind of using both sides of the brain to connect them. And singing is actually really helpful to learn the theology and learn doctrine. If you want to teach ABCs to children, what do?
You teach them a song.
You teach them a song. And actually, as an adult, if I'm having to think about the alphabet, I'm like, A, B, C, D, E, F, G. It's that song.
You still sing it?
Yeah, I still sing it.
Yeah, that's interesting,
because actually, singing really helps people to learn things. And when people are going away from church, they're thinking about the sermon and the main points, but what's in their head is probably the song at the end of.
So nursery rhymes are all set to music for kids, aren't they? They're not just poems; they're all set to music.
And it's not just a kid thing because teachers know that singing helps them learn and helps them remember information. Yeah. It's a tool to do that. So actually it's helpful for us if we're learning stuff in church, learning doctrine, and which is why it's so important actually that the pastor or whoever's making the order of service is thinking about what is happening in the teaching, what is the passage, what is the direction we're going in this morning, and then focus the songs around that.
So actually, to sing well in church, there needs to be a connectivity between the different elements of the service.
Yeah.
Doesn't it? Rather than just, here's one thing, here's another thing, here's another thing. A good service is actually got a coherence to it.
Yeah.
I think Mike Cosper's book, I think, is great on that. I forget its title now. We'll put it in the show notes. Rhythms of Grace. It came to me eventually. Rhythms of Grace. Just about how actually, even when you're building a service, you need to have that kind of the idea of progression and how things are shaping together. Yeah. This is the time to get in my Yip Harburg quote, which I've used before in the podcast. So regular listeners are going to be thinking, there he goes again. But I do like this. So Yip Harburg is the guy who wrote the music and the songs for The Wizard of Oz. And he was once asked about singing. He's not a Christian, as far as I know. Once asked about singing, and he said, "Well, with words, he said, you think a thought. So with words, you think a thought. With music, you feel a feeling, but with a song, you feel a thought." And that's exactly what you're saying, actually, but just in slightly more Christian terms. That singing connects with the whole person, with the mind, with the emotions. So a sad tune. Sad words to a sad tune is very, very strong. And actually, that means as leaders, presumably, we've got to be aware of the manipulative effect that music could have.
Yeah, I wrote my dissertation on that.
Did you? So it can be used for even in church settings. It can be used well, and it can be used poorly, can't it?
Yeah. Which is, I mean, I always remember this quote that Hans Zimmer, who is a film composer.
He is, yeah.
He said, "I can make you happy, I can make you sad, I can make you scared, all with music."
Right.
And I was like, okay, what does that mean in church? So if some churches are kind of, it's getting to the end of the sermon, or even throughout the sermon, are just playing sad music or playing, like, I don't know, fluffy music.
Yeah.
It will make us feel a certain way. So then we're like, if you're feeling a certain way, it means this. You need to do this, or you need, and it is tricky because it can quickly become manipulation.
Yeah.
And I don't think, I've not been to an FIEC church where that is the case. No. I think we are very careful about having our worship, our sung worship times, when we're singing together, having our times of just listening to the sermon, having our times of like prayer and communion, kind of separating it a little.
Yeah.
Because once we kind of add the sad music, we can quite easily manipulate people's emotions, and we don't want to do that.
So we've got to be careful with that, haven't we? And actually, so that means what we sing. If we want to help people sing well, what we sing is actually a really important question.
Yeah.
And again, there's good stuff and there's stuff that's not good. And I guess just help us with this as a singer. So just assume that I don't know anything about singing, which might be an easy assumption to make. I don't know.
Yeah.
I've got a nice little baritone voice, really. But let's assume that I'm putting together a service. I'm choosing items. I've heard a few good things on the latest Matt Redman CD, actually.
Oh, good. Yeah.
So I'm going to put those in the service.
Okay.
I think we learn those. Not everything is easy to sing or suitable to sing congregationally, is it?
No, and actually, often recordings are recorded way too high.
Right.
You have to think as well about, like, this is the song, this is the words, it goes with my order of service, it goes with the sermon. I'm gonna get a male and a female to sing this, because actually as well, keys are different for girls and guys.
Okay.
So what might be easy for a guy to sing would be actually very high for a girl. So if you've put together a song, you want to use it, it might be helpful to try out the keys with a guy and a girl singer.
Okay. Right.
Just to kind of get the balance.
You can send them the YouTube link and say, sing along to this, see how you get on with it.
Yeah, but the YouTube link is usually
too
not
high.
the right key.
Okay.
It depends. It depends who, City Light usually write in good keys that you can. So
there are some good go-to places, aren't there? So
yeah.
So let's just assume I'm a musical dummy.
Okay.
At the moment, I'm starting to get overwhelmed already. I'm thinking, actually, when I have my hymn book, whether it's Christian hymns or praise, whatever it was, ancient and modern, I don't know. When I had my hymn book, life was a lot easier. I just looked in the hymn book, I looked in the theological index, and I picked my songs, and we went for it. It seems to be a little bit more complicated than that now. Is that fair? I mean, there's so many different places that you might get songs from, and some might work and some might not. And
I mean, there is a place still for hymn books. If your church uses hymn books, then use a hymn book. Or, even if it's not a book necessarily, we want to keep singing hymns because our churches are multi-generational, and what might be a really good song for a 20-year-old, an 80-year-old won't know that song and won't necessarily know how to learn it because they're used to learning hymn style. So the styles change a lot.
So syncopation and stuff like that.
We want to be using a variety of different styles in our churches. Hymns that can really engage the older generation. But even if we use hymns, we can actually be creative about it. Be creative about your intros and your kind of the links in between them and the harmonies. You can make it sound more modern. With the way that you support it musically in the band.
I mean, that's a question for musicians rather than leaders, isn't it? But as a leader, you should be confident, actually. I mean, I say to our guys who are leading, I think you can pick anything in. I give them a praise hymn book, and I say to them, we can sing anything in here pretty much. And if you think I don't know the tune, I said we can find a tune that people generally know. And so as a musician, I actually want to empower leaders to feel they have quite a large repertoire in that sense. But actually, you don't want a repertoire that's too big, do you? How many songs do you think you sing at Cornerstone? What's your repertoire?
It's difficult because we have like a file system, and actually some songs in that file system we probably haven't sung for years, but they're there. Because actually it happens sometimes where someone is writing a sermon and they're like, oh, this song that I sang 10 years ago would be perfect for this. And it might be that no one would kind of know it. So the band leader might play a verse and a chorus first, or a verse if it's just a hymn, kind of verse, and then get people to sing it. So it's kind of they're learning it as they go.
Let's come back to learning new songs. I think that's quite an important topic. Just thinking about repertoire. So we at church have a book of 200.
Okay.
And it's one in, one out.
Okay.
So we're not set with that. So there are things that we want to sing outside of that. We do.
Yeah.
But we try and, I mean, that sounds like quite a lot anyway, actually, 200. But if you're singing 6 or 7 things each week, which we do, that's 350 things over the year.
Yeah.
So actually, you basically, I think, need a repertoire of about 200. So I think that's about right.
Yeah, I would say so as well. And I mean, if you're, because the question that we were also talking about is where we kind of find these songs. Yeah. I'd say hymns, like we said, and then there are people that are putting albums together, and you can look them up on Spotify or wherever you listen to music, and there's reliable people who are writing Christian songs.
So give us some examples.
City Light, Sovereign Grace.
Yeah. The Gettys.
Phil Moore.
Phil Moore. There are many Phil Moores. I assume you're referring to the Phil Moore at Cornerstone Church, Nottingham. Yes. Worth looking out, in fact, the anniversary hymn that Phil and Tim Chester wrote for our centenary, which we sung at the Leaders' Conference that's just gone. We taught it, didn't we? It's a great song, really great good, song. And we'll put the link in the show notes. I think people should be learning that. That's my... so actually, how many... We're hearing new stuff all the time. Thinking, that was great. And actually, especially if you go to a conference or an event, and you've sung it with 1,000 people, it feels great. Yeah. And you go back and you say to Bob, the pianist, here we are. We're going to sing this week. I think you can overwhelm a church with new songs. Yeah, and you don't want to do too many a week. Have you got a feel for how often you might do a new song?
I think what we might do as well. It's not even a song a week. It might be a song every 4 weeks. Okay. And what we do as well is we teach the song, and then we might do it again next week, and then next week.
So it's got a bit of repetition behind it.
Yeah, we're learning it together, and then in the future, if we want to use it again, they know it because we've done it a few times in this set,
Shall I tell you my strategy and you can critique it?
Yes, I can, yeah.
I say to our pastor and other leaders, let's do 6 in a year.
Okay.
If other things come up, that's great. But and we plan for that at the beginning of the year. So they're not actually new songs. So they are, if you're planning for them at the beginning of the year, apart from the Centenary song, which will be one of them in 2023, they're largely songs that we've been singing at different events and things in 2022. So actually the thing I like about that is they've been tried and tested. So actually sometimes you sing songs at an event, especially if the band have written something themselves and you sing it, it kind of just about works in the event, but actually sometimes they just don't work. They don't work. That's why I gave up songwriting, because they never worked. But sometimes they just don't work that well. They just don't click with the congregation. And so actually I like to let other people have that pain. So we say 6 at the beginning of the year. And then what I do is I create a little YouTube playlist, which we send around to church. And I create a little song sheet for the songs with a little QR code on for the playlist. And we give everyone a copy at the beginning of the year of the words and say, put this in your Bible, or where you do devotions. So actually people are not just learning the song by listening to YouTube or whatever, but actually they're reading the words perhaps as part of their devotion. So the words and the rhythms and the concepts are familiar to people. And then over the course of the year, we learn those 6. So that's kind of our strategy, which doesn't feel particularly ambitious, but it feels like in our 200, 6 in, 6 out, it's not a bad place to be.
I think that's good. And I think like if you're trying to teach your church a new song, because it might be as well that, which happens in our church, that a sermon is being prepared and they think of a song that the church don't know that actually would go really well. And you can in the week send it out with the notices, so that we're singing a new song on Sunday. Have a listen, like you would, like you said, that you send it out. And then another thing, if you're thinking more long term, that at this point I want to teach this song. If your church is a church that plays music before or after the service, just be playing that song. So
that'd be another way of doing it.
A few weeks before, for a few times. So then while they're drinking their tea and coffee and chatting, they're kind of hearing this song. They're learning it that way as well. There's lots of ways that you can teach a song in the moment, but having that I think repetition is really important.
Now let's just try and help church leaders here, because a lot of people will be thinking, well, that's great. Sally's at Cornerstone, they've got a nice band, which is right. I think you've got a fantastic band. As you know, we use many of you at the Leaders Conference. You're used to playing at other events. I think you lead really well. I think you're a great singer, Sally. And but lots of churches won't have those resources, right? Lots of guys leading. It will be Bob on the piano and Mrs. Miggins on the kazoo. And actually it's more of a challenge. And now I think I want to say to people like that, the music may be more of a challenge, but the singing isn't. Singing is the same. Singing is the thing, isn't it? It's voices raised in praise to God. And you accompany them with the resources you have. And actually, if you have none, you don't accompany, you sing and you get on with it. But actually, it's at those moments when you want to perhaps play something contemporary that Bob isn't quite so comfortable with, or maybe you want to learn something new. That's harder in that kind of setting. So any counsel for us there, how you might learn something when perhaps you haven't quite got the same resources that are available to you in a larger church? I
mean, I went to a Bible college and I studied music and theology, but one of the Sundays I went to a friend's church. And his church was really small and mainly the older generation. And there was this woman on the piano, and she was playing, and it wasn't grade 8 but she was playing the piano and singing. And again, her voice was not grade 8 or whatever standard, but everyone was singing worship. Everyone was following her. And they then later learned that she's not really musical, but no one else stepped up to serve in that area. So she learned piano.
Amazing.
And learned how to lead to serve her congregation. And that's beautiful.
So you work with what you've got.
Yeah.
And even if you have to resort to using recordings or technology, that's not the end of the world.
They also put a YouTube video up with lyrics on, and they just sang that together.
And lots of us did that during lockdown, didn't we? We did. Actually, there are lots of good online resources.
Yeah, absolutely.
So actually, we use at some of our local conferences, and in our small groups at church, sometimes we use something called iSing Worship, which is kind of an online worship accompaniment system. So there are solutions around.
Yeah,
but actually, it's the singing that's the thing. We've got to keep coming back to that.
Absolutely. Yeah. But don't be afraid to put on if you want a more reflective moment, I guess, and you want to teach this song, but you don't feel like it's the right time because you want people to reflect and not suddenly, go away from what's being taught because they're like, oh no, I needed to learn this tune. If you can put a song on, because there's lots of really good videos of recordings, people leading. You can put that video on and people can listen to it and reflect on the words and reflect on what the passage has said and what the speaker has said. And then maybe next week you sing it together.
Okay.
So you've got it on the screen, you've had that moment of reflection, you're listening to the words, you're intently listening to the song, then next week you learn it. Our church often...
You need to think ahead.
Yeah.
So actually, I think... when I lead a service, I think I probably spend 2 hours putting a service together.
Yeah.
Which is probably about, a sermon might take me 7 or 8 hours maybe, but a service 2 hours.
Yeah.
I think you need to give it quality time.
Yeah.
Prayer. You can't just sort of say Saturday night, oh, what haven't we sung for a while? It requires a bit of thinking, doesn't it?
Yeah, it really does. Because as I said,
and think ahead.
It needs to support. Yeah, it needs to support what the service is about. It needs to support the direction of it. Generally, what you want to do is call people to worship at the beginning. So the songs would be like, "Come worship."
Yeah.
Join us.
Yeah.
And then middle might be the kind of more let's bring it. If it's just before the sermon, I wouldn't necessarily have like a very upbeat one because you want to kind of bring it down and get people to like, okay, now.
So let me just push you back on that. Aren't you now manipulating?
No, as in.
How's that different from the manipulation you described earlier? It's a cheeky question, but
it is.
We're talking about bringing it down.
It's a good question to ask. We want to constantly be asking these kind of things. Yeah. I mean, to be honest, I'm thinking more as well because I do a lot of kind of youth work stuff. Usually we have a lot of kind of games, laughter, yeah, happy, hyper.
Yeah.
Then we put a song before the sermon, which is a bit slower, just to calm them down a bit because we don't want them to be like in the sermon. So it's actually like, I don't know if I'd call it manipulation.
It's preparation.
But it's preparation. It's saying, look, we've had this and now we're going to hear it.
Right, so there's nothing wrong with preparation. We just got to search our hearts and make sure we're not manipulating people. That's the difference, isn't it?
And that's it. It's preparation. And the words within the song could, like a classic one before a sermon is "Show us Christ."
Yeah. I thought you were going to say "Speak, O Lord."
All that. Yeah. Well, it's that kind of thing, isn't it? It's like, okay, now we're going to prepare our hearts because God's going to speak to us in this. And then after the sermon, it's very much, this is...
It's response there at that point.
This is a response using a song that supports what the speaker or what the passage is saying.
Yeah. Which is, I think, one of the most difficult points because if your application is quite specific, whatever context you're working in, if the application, let's say, is, I don't know, be a good worker. If you're in the NHS, be a good worker. There aren't many songs about the NHS. It's quite, I find that the most difficult point to choose songs that doesn't undermine the sermon. So actually, interestingly, sometimes I don't sing at the end.
Do you not?
I think sometimes actually there are other ways to reflect and finish a service. That work. I generally do, but there are just moments when actually just silence.
Yeah, you want people to turn what they're hearing into a conversation with God.
Right, that's right.
Into their own personal walk, whether that be singing a song and praising God for what they've heard, or singing a song and feeling really convicted about what they've heard, whether that be a time of silence, like you said, and just thinking about what they've learned, or a video on the screen, or anything. What we want to be doing in that segment is, this is what we've learned. What does that mean for you? How can you be taking this into your life? Maybe you need to have a conversation with God.
So thinking about the service, what we're saying really is think about the service as a whole.
Yeah.
So the idea, people used to talk about, it's very old-fashioned now, people used to talk about the preliminaries and then the sermon. Really unhelpful idea. Think about the service. And actually, it's one of the reasons that I'm not particularly fond of churches. I know why we do it, and we do it. I'm not particularly fond of churches putting sermons online because you're taking something completely you're ripping it out of the context in which it's set. And actually, if you've had a service, perhaps where you've had the Lord's Supper and you've sung a few things, the sermon is preached in that context that those things have happened. So actually, I think we do ourselves a disservice when we talk about the sermon and the rest of the service. And so, hey, let me tell you about my greatest service mistake ever. This is a very young pastor preaching through Ephesians 6.
Yeah.
I thought, wouldn't it be great to sing Soldiers of Christ Arise and Put Your Armour On? Now, Soldiers of Christ Arise and Put Your Armour On has 15 verses the original. I was in quite a conservative church, and they're all good verses. They're all about different parts of the armour. In fact, 2 or 3 verses on each part of the armour. I thought, well, actually, if we're singing about the armour, each one of these verses is a cracking verse.
Yeah.
So even though it only has 5 verses, whatever, in hymn books, it has 15 verses. So I thought, this is a great idea at the time. I thought, actually, what we'll do, it was an evening service, we'll just sing that one song, and we'll split it up into 5 bits of 3 verses. So by the time we get to the end of the service, we've sung all the verses of Soldiers of Christ Arise and Put Your Armour On. Disastrous idea. Disastrous.
Why?
And we were so fed up with the tune. I tell you, it might have worked. And by the time you sung, da, 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 da,
see? What are you singing?
I'm singing. But by the time we got to 15th rendition of that, we were pretty fed up with that tune. I think if I'd chosen different tunes, it might have worked, but yeah, terrible mistake. The point is this, isn't it, that actually how the whole thing works together is really important. Can we just talk about the practicalities as we draw towards a close? So again, I'm thinking, at the Leaders Conference, I love seeing sort of the band up there giving us a good lead. Loved seeing you and hearing you sing. But actually lots of churches wouldn't be in that context. So if I'm leading a service, I may be the only person at the front. Bob's on the right-hand side with the piano. Mrs. Miggins is on the left with her kazoo. I'm the person at the front. I'm not a particularly, perhaps let's assume I'm not a particularly confident singer. Yeah. How can I give a good lead in singing even when I'm not a confident singer?
You don't have to be a confident singer. I think look yourself.
You have to be a confident worshipper.
Confident
That's the
worshiper.
difference, is it?
Yeah. I think what people have reflected that they appreciate about I don't want to make this about myself, but how I lead is that it's clear that I myself am worshipping. If I'm not worshipping myself, as in worshipping the Lord myself, I'm doing something wrong, because people can see through that.
Yes, but what I appreciate about, I don't want to big you up either, but I'm going to. I don't want to make it too much about you either. But actually, what I appreciate about you is you're not lost in you don't appear to be lost in the moment, distanced from all the rest of us.
Oh yeah, no.
So I find that really unhelpful when someone is leading at the front. They're off in their own world somewhere. They're clearly a worshipper at that point, but they're not leading us.
Yeah, you need it's both. It's a balance.
Yeah.
So eye contact.
Yes.
Not just kind of looking up at the ceiling. I think because worship's quite an intimate thing.
Yeah.
Singing worship, people feel quite like they don't want to give people eye contact. But it's so helpful. It's like if you were delivering,
to one another, aren't we?
Yeah, we
Colossians 3,
absolutely
16,
are.
17.
We're doing it together.
Yeah.
And if you're delivering a sermon and you're looking at people, then why are you not looking at people when we're singing worship? Encourage one another. There are times that I know someone who's specifically going through something, and there's a line of a worship song that really speaks into that. I would look at that person and sing it to them, because it's like, this is encouraging for you.
I'm going to be now thinking at any event where you're singing, I'm going to be, is she looking at me now?
They're
is she looking at me now?
No, it's just it's.
So that's a very practical thing, isn't it? Eye contact.
Yeah,
I think open your mouth as well.
Yeah.
I think even if what's coming out isn't particularly pleasing to other people, pleasing to the Lord, I think if you're standing at the front, actually for people to see you just not mumbling is really helpful.
Oh, absolutely. In the Bible, it tells us to sing joyfully. It doesn't tell us to sing well.
Yeah.
No.
That's a bonus, isn't it? If you can sing well. What about this? So this is an interesting point. I think lots of churches now projecting words. That's kind of, I guess that's pretty standard. So someone who's standing at the front leading might actually turn their back to the congregation to look at the words with the rest of the congregation. I wonder if it's actually quite helpful for someone who's leading, even in that sort of context, which is just the pastor who's leading. Let's say just the pastor. It's the pastor who's leading and preaching. I think it's quite happy for him to have a copy of the words and be facing the congregation. Not because you're in any way priestly, but actually just trying to give a lead.
Yeah. Print them out, lead it. And the other thing that I think is really helpful is I've been to churches where the singer is kind of, the lead singer in the band is kind of looking around and like, is this where I come in? Is this where I come in? You need to be helping people come in. Your job is to help them come in. You can't necessarily, it's difficult because
so you need to have asked Bob on the piano.
Yeah.
What intro are you doing to this?
Sure.
Just
And
so I
then
know.
when it's time to sing, like do an exaggerated breath. Be
Okay.
like, and now we're going to sing.
Or a nod.
Yeah,
Smile.
like kind of
Yeah, helpful. Yeah, really helpful.
look like you're about to start, and that helps people come in as well.
And can I tell you my pet hate? If you're at the front, especially if it's just before the sermon, sing. And so I get slightly frustrated. Perhaps again, people are going to write in about this. I get slightly frustrated by preachers who, in the song before the sermon, take a seat, bow their head in prayer. Now, don't get me wrong. I'm really in favour of praying, and actually of preachers praying, but I just think I think that's slightly. I'm not quite sure what word I'm searching for here. It's slightly false. I think you want to.
You're leading your flock.
Yeah, and we're singing together.
Yeah.
So sing with them. If I think if you want to have a quiet moment of prayer, wait until the song's finished and then do it.
You can pray while you're singing.
Yeah.
as
So
well.
that's my personal thing. Okay.
Yeah, I mean,
this is not a view of the FIEC. This is just Adrian who thinks he doesn't like that. But
there's different people. Like, it might be that actually you're really struggling one week and you just need to. This wouldn't necessarily be like a rule of thumb.
That's very gracious and helpful. Thank you. I feel corrected, and that's fine. The singing is the thing, isn't it?
Yeah.
And actually, we want to lead people in singing as we lead people in other ways. That's really important.
Yeah, it's a massive part of it. And in Revelation, it constantly talks about how we will be worshipping, praising, singing.
We will be. And
singing on a Sunday, gathering together as a church on Sunday is a taste of heaven, but singing together as a church.
So one last thought, will our singing be sanctified in heaven? Will we all have perfect pitch?
I don't know. Maybe singing will sound completely different. What is music in heaven? Because there's like loads of different styles throughout the years.
Just because we have a Western scale, this is going to befuddle some people, but we have a very Western scale. You go to some places in the world and there aren't 8 notes in an octave. There are more or less.
Oh, so, loads of different cultures.
Yeah, okay. So we'll end there with just this little, one of the great joys of looking forward to an eternity with Christ is singing is going to be there. It's going to be better. We don't know how it's going to be better. In what form?
But it will be.
How intriguing. Sally, thanks so much for joining us. We love to sing, don't we? We both love to sing. We want other people to sing as well. I hope this has been useful. If you've enjoyed the podcast, please do rate it. It helps. And we look forward to connecting with you soon. Thanks very much.